Welcome to today's lecture on the topic primary separation techniques. So coming to the table of contents, we will see a little bit detail on the importance of primary separation technique. So why exactly we require this separation techniques, what is the importance of this, and also we will study a detail on different types of cells that we have. So these are the cells which are widely used for the production of various products. So we should know the basics of how the cells looks like. So once we know the cell structure, we'll get to know how we can try to disrupt this in case the product is intracellular. So for that particular purpose, this might be very, very essential to know the cell type, so that once we understand the morphology of the cells, we will understand what technique we should go for disrupting the cells so that we can release the product of interest. So we will study about the bacterial cell, fungal cell, plant cell, animal cell, okay, in this particular lecture. So coming to the introduction, so we know that sometimes the cell itself might be our product. So for example, baker's yeast. So this is a good example where the cell itself is used as a product. Whereas we have other products which are either extracellular products or intracellular products. So in my previous lectures, I've already highlighted the importance of these products. So intracellular products are those products which are produced and present within the cell. So for these kind of products, we will have to use cell disruption techniques, and for which you should know the morphology of the organism that you're using, and based on that you can appropriately use suitable disruption techniques so that the products which are present inside the cell gets released, and that can be purified further and it can be used for the particular application. So these are few examples for intracellular products like insulin, chymosin, immunoglobulins, and you have serum albumin, growth factors, and these are all the examples for intracellular products. And coming to extracellular products, so extracellular, so the name itself indicates that it is released into the surface, that means into the system that you have. So if you have a fermentation broth and you have a particular organism inside, and if this organism is producing a product which is extracellular, the organism will start producing it and it will release it into the medium. So good examples for these are antibiotics, alcohol, citric acid, acetic acid, amino acids, and few of the polysaccharides. So these are the examples for extracellular products. So once you know exactly where is your product present, then only it will be easy for us to decide what treatment we have to give. So in case it is intracellular, then only we go for cell disruption. If the product is extracellular, there is no point doing cell disruption there, right? Because we are talking about energy requirement. We are talking about how fast we are getting the product. So we should know about the products. So once you know it is extracellular, you know once you do your fermentation and you have a extracellular product with you, you can do a simple solid liquid separation, and once you do a solid liquid separation, since I know my product is extracellular, I am supposed to process the supernatant that I get. But same way, if my product is intracellular, I have to do a cell disruption, and then only I take the supernatant. For first trial of your fermentation broth with cells, you do a solid liquid separation. The first stage in this, you have to collect the pellet, because you know your product is present within the cell in case of intracellular products. So once you collect the pellet, you will have to suitably apply certain cell disruption techniques to this pellet, and so that finally the cells are broken apart so that the products gets released. And now when you do a solid liquid separation, you're supposed to collect the supernatant, because you have already disrupted the cell, you have released the protein, and that protein will be in the supernatant. So the same thing is shown in this diagram. You can have a look at it. It is a unit operation for recovery of intracellular product. So whatever I explained is there in the slide. The cell is harvested, cell disruption is done, and then you use the cell disruption technique. After that you filter it, that is the solid liquid separation. You have your cell debris with you, and you have your metabolites in the supernatant, which can be sent for further downstream processing. So now I told you the importance of this intracellular and extracellular products, and in case the products are intracellular, it is very, very essential to understand the morphology of the organism that you're using, so that you should understand how will I apply suitable cell disruption techniques. So we will study a little bit detail on the morphology of various cells. So coming to the cell types, we have bacterial cell, fungal cell, plant cell and animal cell. So to understand what kind of cell disruption technique will I go for, the analysis or understanding the bacterial, fungal, plant and animal cell wall is very, very essential. So we'll study the detail of each one of this. So coming to bacterial cell. So this is how a bacterial cell looks like. It is a prokaryotic cell. So you can see you have a cell wall, you have various other things like capsule, you have cytoplasmic membrane, periplasmic space, and you have chromosome, ribosome. So these structures you all already know. You might have studied about a bacterial cell. But now we are interested in where is my product present. So in case you feel that the product of interest is present in the periplasmic space, okay, I'm just giving you an example. So if your product of interest is present in the periplasmic space, so you know that your periplasmic space is here, right? So when you're applying a cell disruption technique, so you can disrupt the cell only till this level. So if you're doing this, definitely you are trying to reduce the burden of DPT steps, because you will require less energy to break till this, whereas you will require more energy to break inside. So if you're breaking till this and getting your product out, that means you are getting a little pure form of the product. So less DPT steps might be sufficient to get the final pure product. But in case you're disrupting it completely, just imagine you're disrupting it completely, then you have all these also contaminating your product, but you are interested only in the product which was present in the periplasmic space, then you have to remove all of these and keep only this. So it will increase your DPT steps, and we all know if your DPT steps are going to increase, your product, there will be a lot of errors in each step and you may lose the product in each step. So it's always better to have minimum DPT steps with maximum yield in a particular system. So for that, you'll have to know about where is my product present, and based on that you can decide till where the disruption has to be done, and for that what suitable technique has to be used. All that can be done based on the literatures and various previous studies that we have done. Okay, so in this way you can study about the bacterial cell. So when you talk about bacteria, we know that we have gram-positive bacteria and we have gram-negative bacteria. So there is a difference in the cell wall of gram-positive and gram-negative. So let us see a little bit detail on that. So coming to a gram-positive bacterial cell wall. So this is a cross section. Okay, so if I can show you this, so this is the cell wall. Okay, so in case this bacteria is a gram-positive one, the cell wall here is broken down and the cross section of that is shown here. So it is something like the whole cell is here. Okay, and this is the cytoplasm and this is the cell wall of that organism. So you can see there is a lipid bilayer. Okay, so there is a lipid bilayer with membrane proteins attached, and then you have something called as peptidoglycan sheet. Okay, so this is there in the outer membrane of the gram-positive bacterial cell, and there is a special structure called as teichoic acid, which is very, very specific to gram-positive cell wall. Okay, so this is a structure, typical structure of the gram-positive bacterial cell wall. Similarly, let us see the structure of gram-negative bacterial cell wall. So in case of gram-negative bacterial cell wall, so this is again the cytoplasm. So you can see here the cell wall is thick. That is, you have two lipid bilayers in a gram-negative cell wall, and you have a thin peptidoglycan sheet in between, and the outer membrane, that is the peptidoglycan and the lipid bilayer, is attached by lipopolysaccharides, and you have outer membrane here and few lipopolysaccharides are there here, which is attached to the lipid bilayer, and you have certain porins and membrane proteins are also there. So when you compare a gram-positive cell wall with the gram-negative cell wall, it is very, very clear that the gram-negative cell wall is more thick compared to gram-positive cell wall. So what does that indicate you? So if you are working on gram-positive cell wall, then less energy might be sufficient for disrupting the cell to release the products. But if you are using a gram-negative cell wall, you will have to have more disruption done to release the contents which are intracellular. So in this way, the morphology of the cell that you are using becomes very, very essential to understand that, so that you know how much disruption is required so that my products which are present in the cell gets released. So in this case, you may require more energy, and in this case of gram-positive, you may require less energy. So that is why we are studying about the morphology of cells. So we know this cell wall is rigid, and we have various products here. So that is what we have highlighted already. I need not explain that again. You can see there is peptidoglycan, and this peptidoglycan is nothing but the polymer of sugar and peptide. And in gram-positive, we saw there is a special structure that is thicoic acid, and in gram-negative, we have an outer membrane, which is again a lipopolysaccharide. So in this way, you have a thicker cell wall in gram-negative cell in comparison with gram-positive cell. So this is little more detail on the gram-negative one. It is more resistant to drugs. So if you are using certain drugs for treatment, you have to know that these are more resistant to drugs compared to gram-positive. And these will stain pink in color, that is due to the safranin stain, and gram-positive are purple in color. So those things you might already know. And this stores a lot of degradative enzymes in the periplasmic space. You can see there. So many of these products which are there in gram-negative are present in the periplasmic space, and that might be our product of interest. So you'll have to apply suitable techniques to disrupt the cell till that level so that the periplasmic space proteins are, enzymes are released, and your products are there with you for further processing. And these are chemically resistant, and they have a thin peptidoglycan layer, which we already saw. You can see here the peptidoglycan sheet is thin in comparison with gram-positive, which is thick peptidoglycan sheet. So that is the detail about the bacterial cell wall, that is either the gram-positive cell or the gram-negative cell. So coming to the fungal mycelium, so we use a lot of fungal cells also for culturing, for production of various products. So you should know even about the fungal cell wall. So fungal cell wall is made up of 3 layers. Okay, you have alpha glucan, beta glucan, and glycoprotein. Okay, and apart from these layers, you have a significant amount of chitin. Okay, chitin is always present in a fungal cell wall, and this chitin is nothing but a polymer of N-acetyl glucosamine. Okay, it is a homopolymer of these molecules which gives rigidity to the fungal cell wall. So this is a typical structure of a fungal cell wall. So you can see even here you have a lipid bilayer, and you have these alpha glucans, beta glucans, and glycoproteins. So this is my structure, and this is the mannose sugar. Okay, the arrow marks are not shown properly. So here you can see this is the mannose sugar, and this is the glycoprotein, and this is the alpha glucan, and this is the beta glucan. Okay, so this is alpha glucan, this is beta glucan, this is glycoprotein, the black one, and this grape-like structure is mannose sugar. So this is a typical mannose sugar is seen in a fungal cell wall. Okay, and in between there will be chitin also, which gives rigidity to the fungal cell wall. So coming to plant cells, okay, so we have to study about plant cells also, because a lot of products have been produced within the plant cells also. So a typical cell wall of plant cell will have hemicellulose, cellulose, and lignin. Okay, so these are the components which are usually present, and it helps in the growth and development. So you have something called as primary cell wall and secondary cell wall. So the primary cell wall allows the cell to grow and divide. So growth and division happens with this primary cell wall, and secondary cell wall is usually for depositing. Okay, and this deposits within the primary cell wall. I'll show you the image which makes it even more clear. But secondary cell wall is usually seen as it deposits within the primary cell wall, and this happens once the cell stops growing. Okay, so much thicker and stronger because of lignin. So this plant cell wall is thick and strong because of the lignin content present in it. Okay, so if more lignin, it is more strong. If less lignin, it is less strong. So in this way, you can find out based on the lignin content the strength of the cell. Because more is the strength, more energy you require to break it. But if the lignin content is less, the cells are not very strong, you can disrupt it easily. So for that reason itself, we are studying about the different components of the cell wall. So the main component is cellulose, which is made up of repeated molecules of glucose, which is attached to end with alpha-1,4 linkage. So let me show the diagram so that it makes it clear. So you can see here, you have the middle lamellar region, and then you have this primary cell wall. And within that, you have the secondary cell wall. Okay, so in the secondary cell wall, you have hemicellulose, that is this gray color ones. You have lignin, which are the star-like structures. Okay, and you have proteins also there, you can see there. and you can have hemicellulose, which I have shown you already, and cellulose is this, this is cellulose, okay, the thick ones, and the gray ones are the hemicellulose. So in this way you can have this cellulose, hemicellulose and lignin within the secondary cell wall, and this is the primary cell wall. So the function of cell wall is to prevent the enlargement of cells, to protect the intracellular components, and to provide rigidity to the plants. So this is the main component or main function why a cell wall in plant is very, very rigid. So for these purposes it is very rigid, and you have various waxes and other things also within the certain plant materials. So you might have heard about lotus plants, and the leaf of the lotus has got this waterproofing capability. Okay, so that is because there is suberin wax. So this is the wax that is present in the cell wall of a lotus plant, and because of which it has got the waterproofing capability. That is, it prevents the evaporation and dehydration of water. So it has got this property. So this is the wax which is there, which is giving that property. So we can think about various cell lines like that. So you should know the property of those cells, and then only you can think about how will I use that particular cells for the application. So coming to animal cells, we know that animal cells do not have a cell wall, and the cell membrane, it is nothing but a fluid mosaic model of lipid, proteins and carbohydrates. In which it will have an intrinsic protein and an extrinsic protein. So this is a lipid bilayer. So you can see this is a lipid bilayer which is having a glycerol head and fatty acid tail, and you can see there are certain proteins which are attached here. So if the protein is attached within the membrane, that is, it is part of it is present inside and part of it is outside. So these kind of proteins which are attached will be called as intrinsic proteins. Whereas you can see certain proteins are attached to the wall, that is to the glycerol head, which is outside the lipid bilayer. So these kind of proteins will be called as the extrinsic proteins. Okay, and you can see certain lipids are also there which are called as the boundary lipids. So in this way you can have a fluid mosaic model, and this is the typical cell wall of an animal cell. So let us see some difference between the plant cells and animal cells, because you should know like how much disruption might be required when you are working on these cell lines. So you know that plant cells are bigger and they have thicker and stronger cell wall which is made up of cellulose. We have already seen that. So since this cell wall is very thick and strong, it is difficult to disrupt. So this is what we are interested in, how difficult it is to disrupt the cells. So plant cells are more difficult to disrupt in comparison with animal cells. Okay, and even if you have certain cultured plant cells, okay, that is nothing but you are trying to produce this plant cells using tissue culture techniques. So these kind of cultured plant cells are less robust. That means the difficulty in disrupting this is slightly less compared to the plant cells which are naturally grown. And the size of animal and plant cells vary between this size, that is 1 to 100 micrometer. So these cells are in this size, and you should know the size also, plus you should know which is more difficult to disrupt. So plant cells are more difficult to disrupt in comparison with animal cells. So you can see here, animal cells do not have a cell wall. We saw that it has got only the plasma membrane, that lipid bilayer. So they can be ruptured within one pass in the disruptor. So we'll study this about the disrupting systems, and when we study that you will understand what I'm talking about, this one pass. That means if you use a system for disrupting these plant cells or animal cells, how many times this cells has to be passed through that equipment so that the cell gets ruptured and the product gets released. So if I give a typical example, for animal cells, one pass might be sufficient and the pressure required in that system might be just 2000 psi. But if you're using a plant cell, you can see here, plant tissue, it is around 40,000 psi, right? So you can see here, the pressure required is very high because these cells are very strong compared to animal cells. So you require more pressure, and you may require more passes also sometimes. One pass may not be sufficient. You may have to use 2, 3, 4 passes to disrupt the cell and release the products of interest. Yeast cells will require approximately 20,000 psi. So yeast cells are also strong enough, and insect blood cells will require 15,000 psi. So you can just have an understanding that you require different pressures for handling different cell lines. So based on that, different pressures for handling the cell lines means the rigidity or compactness of that cells can be understood. So this is a typical cell wall of a yeast cell wall. Okay, yeast is again coming under the category of fungi, which is a unicellular fungi. So you can see there, even here you have this alpha glucan, beta glucan and manoproteins. Okay, so apart from that, there is chitin, similarly as in the case of fungus. So you can see here, the small round molecule that is shown is the chitin molecule. So yeast is typically in this size, 2 to 20 micrometer in size, and it is spherical or ellipsoidal in shape. So the molds that we know are bigger in size in compared to this yeast. And the plasma membrane is mainly made up of the lipopolysaccharides. That is nothing but the lipid bilayer. Okay, so same lipid bilayer is there, and outside you have this alpha glucan, beta glucan and manoprotein along with chitin. So this is the typical cell wall of a yeast. Okay, so a lot of times we use yeast for production of various products, right? For production of ethanol, we use yeast, that is Saccharomyces cerevisiae. So in the same way, you should know, right? Ethanol is an extracellular product. We know that. So there we need not go for cell disruption. But if you're using this for production of some product which is produced intracellularly, then you will have to disrupt the cell. So which you will have to know what is present in the cell wall. And once you know what is present in the cell wall, if you're trying to use, imagine, enzymatic treatment, you'll have to know based on the molecule present, which enzyme can be used for breaking down that particular cell wall. So that is why we are studying this in detail about various cell walls, and we saw about bacterial cell, fungal cell, plant cell, animal cell and yeast cell. So about in all of these, we have seen that plant cell is very rigid and it is very strong, which means it requires more treatment for breaking apart so that the products of intracellular properties can be exploited. So that's it for today. Thank you for watching, guys. Do subscribe the channel for more updates.